All right, guys, so now what I'm going to try to help you with is basically how to take care of your bow, and in particular, what not to do. A bobbly bow should last you the rest of your life if you take care of it properly. What I'm about to show you is, for the most part, good across the board when it comes to any recurve or longbow, but it's very important. First thing right out of the box, when you get your bobbly, don't over tighten your bolts. You basically want to get them as snug as you can get without going too far. You want to use your common sense in terms of how tight you need to get them. If you get them tightened down and you can't go any farther, please don't. We have a video showing you how tight to get your bolts. So check that out. Just keep it in the back of your mind every time you put your bow together to remember that. Secondly, is the stringing of your bow. Always use a bow stringer. I know a lot of you guys have heard that before, but it's very critical. A lot of the damage I see in terms of twisted limbs, bows that don't shoot right because the limbs are tweaked, whatever the case may be, happen in the stringing process. Some guys that want to take this thing and put their leg through it and do this number, please don't do that with your bobbly. Another thing to keep in mind when you're stringing your bow, using your bow stringer, is to take your time with it. Don't get in a hurry, double check everything. The next thing, and it's pretty obvious, is not to dry fire your bow. Basically what that means is, for those of you that don't know, is to just draw this bow back and let it go without an arrow being knocked on the string. That's the worst thing you can do for your bow. Chances are, if you do that one time, it's not gonna have a very good ending for you. One big thing that a lot of guys don't think about when it comes to taking care of their bow are the arrows being shot out of their bow. And if one of these little ears here comes off or is cracked, is weakened in any way, if you put this arrow with this busted nock on your bow, draw it back and shoot it, you are basically dry firing your bow. Because if this nock has any kind of weakness at all, it's going to shatter on you. Parts and pieces are going to come flying off, and before you know it, you've dry fired your bow, and that you do not want to happen. Another thing you do before you go shoot, if you're shooting carbon arrows, flex them. Take each one of them and bend them just like this. You're going to listen for any kind of cracking, any kind of popping. You're going to look for anything that's out of place. And on some of the carbon arrows, you'll see a little note that says flex them. But each time before you go shoot, check the nocks on each one of your arrows. Give them a little pinch. Make sure that they're not broken or anything like that. Flex your carbon shafts. Make sure that's good. And just keep an eye on that stuff, because it can happen in an instant. In terms of arrows, to protect your bow's life, you want to shoot an arrow that's heavy enough. Now, the biggest thing I see is a mix-up in terminology, and that being GPI versus GPP. The term that is most commonly used incorrectly is GPI. That does not mean grains per pound, which is what GPP is. GPP, grains per pound, is the most important number that you can have for your bow. Grains per pound means you're going to take the total weight of this arrow, the feathers, the shaft, the insert, the field point, all of it, and you are going to divide that number by the poundage you are shooting on your bow. However many pounds of draw weight you're pulling, you're going to divide the total grains of this arrow, the total grain weight, by that number. So let's say if you have a 400 grain arrow, weighs 400 grains, everything put together, field point, feathers, all of it, and you are shooting a 50-pound bow, well, if you divide 400 by 50, that means you're shooting 8 grains per pound. So if you find some arrows that say 8.1 GPI, that doesn't mean that you're going to be shooting 8.1 grains per pound. That means that 1 inch of your shaft weighs 8.1 grains. This is very important, because from what I've found, you don't want to shoot any arrow out of, in my opinion, any recurve less than 8 grains per pound. If you go any less than 8 grains per pound, not grains per inch, per pound, you're putting a lot more stress on your bow than what you really need to be putting on it. So just keep in mind, GPI is totally different from GPP. The grains per pound, you absolutely want to keep an eye on. All right, so what we're going to go over now is probably the most important thing you can learn about really any recurve or longbow. The brace height is the measurement that you get from the deepest point of the grip here all the way to the string, okay? This measurement affects many, many things. Number one, it's going to affect how your bow shoots. It's going to affect how it feels, how it sounds, how fast it is, how slow it is, all of those things. But most importantly, it's going to affect how durable your bow is. The brace height, in essence, is a stopping point for your limbs. To measure the brace height, I'm going to get this bow square here. We like to use bow squares. I'll show you how to do it with the bow square and the ruler. Basically, we're going to put the bow square in the throat of the grip, and there's little markings on the back of this bow square here that tells you how far you are. Right there, I'm basically exactly 8 inches, which is perfect. The ruler, you do the same thing. You just put the ruler on there and it'll tell you exactly where you are. Now, if 8 inches is what's recommended for the brace height, you always want to keep your eye on that. Always, always. If your brace height gets too low, if you're only 7 inches from here to here, your bow's going to be noisier. It's not going to be as comfortable to shoot. It might feel a little funny. But most importantly, every shot you take with a brace height that's too low is most likely doing some kind of damage to your bow. If you realize, oh man, my brace height's too low, what you're going to do is take the Flemish string off of this bow. You're going to add some twist to this string, make it shorter basically. Put the string back on, measure your brace height again. Now, if you're unsure on your Bob Lee what your brace height should be, check the brace height recommendations on our website. When you get your bow, you're going to get one of these sheets of paper and it's going to tell you right here, handwritten, what the brace height on your bow needs to be. So always, always, always keep that in the back of your mind. But one thing I do see guys doing from time to time is if they have an issue getting their bow as quiet as they want it to be, they like to put a little piece of material here in between the string and the limb. We absolutely do not recommend doing that. There is a string groove running down the center of your Bob Lee limb. It's there for a reason. It's there to help keep your limb where it should be. If you put a piece of material in here, there's a real chance that if that piece of material is thick enough, it can create its own string groove over time. And before you know it, the string is actually sitting off to one side where the original string groove that's built into the limb is on the other side. So just keep this area in here raw, as I call it. Don't put any kind of felt or moleskin on there. It's not going to do anything good for you. It's only going to hurt you. All right, so a lot of guys have questions on how to properly store their bow. This is the best way to store your bow. Just like this. You hang it horizontally by 2 pegs, most of the time on the wall, and it's going to hang just like this. You really don't want any pressure on your limbs. You don't ever want to leave the bow strung if it's going to get too hot. And by too hot, I mean if it's going to get hot at all. 80, 85, 90 degrees, don't leave it strung for an extended period of time. Don't leave the strung recurve in your vehicle. I've seen that so many times. You know, guys go into Walmart for 10 minutes and they come out and the sun's beating down on their limb and all of a sudden their limb's coming apart. This thing is not indestructible. It's pretty close, but heat will absolutely get to the glue in this limb and it'll come apart on you if it gets too hot. So the next thing we're going to cover is basically how to protect your bow against moisture. When you get it home, you're done hunting. If it got wet at some point during the hunt, if it's still wet, take the string off of it, take it apart, dry it, clean it real good. Let all the pieces sit out, get nice and dry. Basically, don't put it up wet. If you leave this bow in water for an extended period of time, I can guarantee you it's not going to do good things to it. So just treat it like you would any other kind of fine piece of hunting equipment. You got to clean it, dry it, take care of it, and make sure you treat it right. If you get to a point where you're confused about something, anything at all, call me, call Rob, we'll help you out with it. That's what we're here for. And we hope you enjoy your bow.